Hello, hello. Welcome to another installment of my video series on the Anbernic RG35XX. In this video, I'm going to be upgrading Garlic OS from version 1.2.3 to 1.4.1. And this video is going to have three main sections. Section 1, what do I need to know before upgrading to or above 1.2.7? AKA where are my Gameboy Advance saves, because after 1.2.7 they switched to a different Gameboy core, Gameboy Advance core, and we're going to cover that. The next question, should I upgrade? And spoiler alert, maybe not. In fact, after upgrading on this video, I downgraded to version 1.3.4, and basically if it's not broken, don't fix it. And finally, we're going to cover how to upgrade, which is basically we're going to back up everything on your card and do a full reflash. And that should cover the intro. Let's get to the video. The question here is, what do I need to know before upgrading? Specifically, upgrading to or above version 1.2.7. This is because version 1.2.7 introduced a new Game Boy Advance core. You can see here that the old default was GBSP and the new one is MGBA. And apparently there was a number of games that didn't work correctly in GBSP, so that's why they changed the core. However, many people, myself included, did not run into any issues with the GBSP emulator. However, despite all those details, the real question is, what does that mean when upgrading? Now, if Game Boy Advance games have been working for you just fine, you have a number of saves already, and everything's working fine, all it means is you need to rename a single folder. That's it. One folder. And it's going to be changing the GBA folder to GBSP, and everything will just keep on running. But if you actually want to switch to the new default core, well, you're going to need to move your saves over, and they have to be in-game saves, not save states. Don't worry, we're going to cover all that in the actual upgrading Garlic OS section of the video. The other big change in Garlic OS is version 1.3.5. You can see the details highlighted here. In this version, you can see it says the controller driver was rewritten. This had big changes on how the controller is actually handled by the operating system. At the time, this broke many of the ports. However, by the time this video is uploaded, a lot of the ports have been updated to work, so you're probably not going to have any problem as long as you re-download those. One thing I noticed is it basically broke my USB controllers, because on 1.4.1, I couldn't get port 1 to remap, and that screwed a lot of things up. But with 1.4.1, and then I actually upgraded to 1.4.5 after recording this video, and I was able to remap the buttons on port 1. However, for some reason, L1 would power off the device. It was like anytime I pressed L1 on the controller, the device would just power off. So hopefully that gets fixed. I still had to revert back to version 1.3.4 at the end of the recording to get my controllers to work again. And speaking about having to go back to a previous version, you might have the question, should I upgrade? And I gotta tell you, maybe not. In fact, probably not. Because is everything working for you? Then no, don't upgrade. I stayed on version 1.2.3 for a while because everything was working fine. All the games I played ran fine. The OS was stable, didn't have any glitches, no problems. In fact, all the Game Boy Advance issues some people were talking about that prompted them to upgrade the core, I didn't run into. Everything seemed fine. And when I did upgrade, the USB controllers didn't work right. I mentioned that, and I had to go back. I had to go back to version 1.3.4. In conclusion, if you're happy with how the device is currently working, go ahead, keep that version. Don't bother upgrading. You only need to upgrade if there's actually something you want from the newer version. All right, how do we actually upgrade? Now we're going to get to work. So this is going to be a full flash upgrade. Copy and paste on top of stock usually works fine. It's definitely faster, as well as leaving most of the data on your SD card intact. However, the copy over stock can also introduce issues, especially in this case since we're upgrading past many OS revisions. The full flash option will often avoid many possible issues. Another good reminder right now is to save your Garlic OS downloads. See, Black Serif doesn't keep old versions of the OS freely available on their website, so if you have a version of Garlic that works for you, remember, keep that download. And it can help if you number them like I have here. You want to keep track of what versions you actually have. Now for the actual upgrade process, we're going to make a backup of our card. You might be wondering, what do we need to back up? The most important thing to back up is your saves folder. Now, this folder has all of your save games and save states. Realistically, everything else on your SD card could be downloaded again. Your saves, your game progress, this is the only thing that's truly irreplaceable. On a single SD card setup, this is in your ROMs partition, the second partition. On a dual SD card setup, it's on your second card. For this upgrade process, we're actually not going to be touching the second card, but if you're using a single card setup, you're going to want to back up the entire card. Here you can see on the right, this is my backups folder. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here and give it a name. Here I'm actually naming it for the date, but you could also name it for the version of Garlic you're backing up. That's probably a better idea. Since I have a 2-card setup, I'm going to make a folder for SD1. Then inside that folder, I'm going to create my folders for MISC. Then we're going to go to the MISC partition. This is the smaller partition on your main SD card. I'm just going to copy everything, paste it right into my backup folder. There we go. Next thing to back up is the ROMs folder. I'm going to go ahead, create a new folder for my ROMs backup. Now, if you're using a single card setup, you probably have your saves folder in here and maybe even, screenshots are in here. I don't have all that. I just have really the custom firmware, but still, I'm going to go ahead, copy everything from my ROMs partition on the SD card over to the backup folder. And since I am using a 2-card setup, I'm going to go ahead, create a folder in my backups for the SD card 2, and I'm going to copy my saves over. If you wanted to be safe, you could copy everything, your BIOS and ROMs folder from your SD card 2. I'm only copying my saves since that's all I need. Now that we backed up our card, we're going to download the new image. On Black Serif's website, I need to download 001 and 002 of the micro SD card image. That's right, you need both 001 and 002. Moving to my downloads folder, I'm going to extract them. You only need to extract the 001 image. It'll automatically move to the second one. You can see here I'm going to use 7-zip, extract it to a folder. Once it's extracted, we can go ahead, open it, and you'll be able to see the Garlic image came up. If you get an error, you probably didn't download the second file. As long as you don't have an error message, you're good to go. For the actual flashing, I'm going to go to download Balena Etcher. I'm going to download the portable version. That way I don't have to install anything. Go ahead, download that. Once it's downloaded, we're going to our downloads folder, double click on Balena Etcher, should launch. Go ahead, we're going to pick the file that we extracted, the Garlic IMG. Go ahead, pick that. Select the target, which is going to be your SD card. Go ahead, select, and flash. We're going to go ahead, fast forward the flash process. Once the flash is done, I'm going to need to eject the SD card, then pop it back in for the computer to recognize it. When it does recognize it, you'll probably get one of these, you need to format the disk drive before you can use it. Just cancel it. Cancel that. I usually get 2 of those messages. And to keep everything neat, I like to label my partitions. So if I right-click on this computer, click Manage, it'll bring up the computer management. I can then go to Disk Manager and rename the partitions. Once it loads, you'll see that drive G is my MISC partition, drive J is going to be my ROMs partition. So I'm going to right-click on G, go to Properties, and in this blank spot, I'm going to type in the name MISC. There we go. Then I need to find J, same thing, right-click on J, go to Properties, change it to ROMs, and now I'm talking ROMs. Keeps everything neat and orderly. Here is where you want to extend your ROMs partition. You can see I'm using the Mini Tool Partition Wizard. This is actually a clip from my Install Garlic OS video, so there's more details there. But I'm just going to click on that ROMs partition, go to Extend. You can see I've got some space after here. I'm going to go drag that slider, go ahead, expand it. If you're on a dual SD card setup, this isn't really important because you're going to use all the ROM space on your second one. But if you're using a single SD card setup, you definitely need to do this. Otherwise, you're only going to have like 3 gigs of space for your ROMs. Next, we need to restore from the backup. So on the left, I've got my backup folder, and on the right, I've got the newly flashed SD card. I'm going to copy over the boot logo since I have a custom boot logo in my backup. So that puts the new boot logo over. I'm also going to copy my custom console icons. Now that's on your second partition, the custom firmware folder, skins, system. Yep, those are the system icons. You can see on the right, those are the ones that come with Garlic. On the left side, I'm in my backup folder. I'm going to, custom firmware, skins. Here you can see my custom console icons. These are from the Tico Dark skin. And one thing to note, you can see the icon on the right. We have an icon for GBA and an icon for GPSP. And they're both the same because they're both to represent the Game Boy Advance. But on the left, my custom icons, I'm actually not using a custom one for GPSP. So if I copy all the icons over, go ahead, replace, you'll see that I actually have a custom icon for GBA, but the default icon for GPSP. This will help us to see what core we're actually using on the Anbernic itself. And obviously you need to copy over anything else that needs to be on your SD card. So any BIOS, ROM, saves that you have in your backup, make sure you copy them if they're on your primary card. If you're on a 2 SD card setup, your second SD card hasn't been touched, so you're good there. But make sure you copy everything to your SD card before we switch back over to the Anbernic. Now here, this is important. This is where we do the switch for the new core. Now, if you have existing Game Boy Advance saves and your Game Boy Advance games were working just fine, all we need to do is in our ROMs folder, change the GBA folder to GPSP, as you can see right here. Changing the name of this folder to GPSP ensures we keep using GPSP as our emulator, and since all of our saves were made in that emulator to begin with, everything will just keep working just fine. Switching to the Anbernic, we're going to go to our consoles menu, and if you remember the custom icons part a few minutes ago, I made sure that GPSP had the default console icon, which is right there. So we know we're actually using the GPSP emulator or core. Here I'm scrolling down to Metroid Fusion. I already have a save on this. We go ahead and launch it. Yep, you can see the game still loads just fine. And in a minute, I'm actually going to press the hotkey, function L2. Function L2, or sorry, menu L2. That should restore my save state. And boom, you can see I got a save state right here at the end of the game. Obviously, save state's still working after the upgrade. It's because we manually changed it to the GPSP core, so all my save state's still there. I'm gonna go ahead and let myself die so the game can kind of reset for me. Yep. There we go. Oh, just gonna run into this guy and die. There we go. So now I'm gonna say no, go to the title, and we can see if I hit resume game, or load game. Yep, you can see my save right there. So both in-game saves and save states were kept during this upgrade. In fact, if I go to the menu and I go to save slot, you can see we're at slot 8, so there's already several save states in there. That's a seamless upgrade from the old OS. But you may ask, what happens if we did have problems? What happens if some of our Game Boy Advance games were having slowdowns or other issues that they said were fixed with the new core, which is MGBA core? Well, to switch to that core, we're going to need to switch back to the computer. Switching back to the computer, let's navigate to the ROMs folder on your SD card, and we'll need to change the GPSP folder to GBA, all capitals. You can see I'm renaming it to GBA. Now, real quick, I'm going to show you switching back to the Anbernic, changing the folder to GBA. We can see I've got my custom Game Boy Advance icon that shows us we're using the new core, the MGBA core. And if I actually launch Metroid Fusion, you can see there's no save game there. So that's what happens if you just upgrade without doing anything else. But we're going to switch back to the computer and move our saves over to the new core. Jumping back to the computer, on the left I have my SD card, and on the right I have my backup folder. On both of them, I'm going to go into the saves folder, current profile, and saves. Remember, you can only move in-game saves over between cores. You can't move save states. So on the left side, I'm actually going to open MGBA. That's the new core. And on the right side, I'm going to go into the actual old core, saves, current profile, saves, and then GPSP. Now remember, these are in-game saves, not save states. So you'll need to actually go into the game menu and click save if you haven't already to move them over. In this example, I actually have some saves in my MGBA folder. You might not have those. In fact, if you didn't start the core, you might not even have an MGBA folder. So if you don't go ahead, create it. Remember, it's case sensitive, so lowercase m, capital GBA. And my MGBA saves I actually don't need, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those. Then I need to copy from my backup folder the saves I want to move over. So copy, paste, and you can tell the icon is different because the extension is different. The old core, or the GPSP core, uses SAV files, while the new core, or the MGBA core, uses SRM files. So when we copy our saves over, I'm going to need to rename them to .srm. It'll give you a little warning. That's okay. You still want to change the extension, click yes. And a little note here, if you don't see the extensions, make sure you go to View and file name extensions. So up top, view, make sure that little checkbox for file name extensions is clicked, and then you'll be able to see the extensions and you'll be able to rename them. Cutting back to the good old Anbernic RG35XX, you can see I've got the Gameboy Advance icon logo. That's my custom, so we know we're using MGBA. And if I cut ahead to launching Metroid Fusion, you can see that the in-game save moved over right there. One thing to note, if you started the game before you copied your saves over, make sure to launch the game with the start button. The start button will reset the game because you need to start from the beginning. If you didn't start the game before you move the saves over, that's fine. Hitting the start certainly won't hurt, but you might want to hit start to refresh the ROM. But there you go. I'm able to pick up my game save on the new core, no problems. And one last thing I'm going to cover, you might have noticed that when you upgrade the OS like this, your favorites are gone. We're going to go ahead and fix that. Okay, jumping back to the computer, I've got my SD card on the left, and I've got my backups folder on the right. I'm going to navigate to the custom firmware folder, then RetroArch, then .RetroArch, and you can see this file right here, content_favorites.lpl. That's my actual favorites file. Now, I'm going to open it with Notepad just so you can see what's going on. There's the file. I'm going to snap that to the left. Then I'm going to navigate to that same folder on the right side in my backups folder. On the left side, you can see I actually made some favorites just so we can tell what's going on. But on the right side, these are my old favorites, and the important thing to know is the path. You can see the path to the Game Boy Advance games has /GBA as the folder. Now, if you moved to the new core, to the MGBA core, that path is fine. However, if you're still going to keep the old core and you renamed it to GPSP, then you'll need to rename the path to GPSP. But if, like me, like I said, you moved over to the new core, then that's fine. Just pay attention to the path in the favorites. But if everything's good or you've updated it, we just need to copy this file from our backups over to the SD card. So yep, I'm going to copy it from my backups folder. Then I'm going to paste it into the SD card and replace. There we go. And going back to the Anbernic, just like that, all my favorites are there. Simple as that. Good to have them back. And there we are. This operating system is getting upgraded rapidly. So once again, I suggest keeping a copy of any version that works for you, just in case you need to roll back. I personally had to go back to 1.3.4 after recording this video because my USB controllers weren't working. I'm going to have more on that in an upcoming Controllers Revisited video. But as you can see, this isn't a difficult process, at least once you know what to do in terms of, I'll rename this folder or copy this over here. But understanding what you need to do can get complicated, and even I put off upgrading my RG35XX for a while. I suggest that if you're happy with how your device is working, don't even bother upgrading. Really, I say only look into upgrading if you see a feature that you want or if it addresses a specific issue that you're having. And that about wraps up this installment of this RG35XX series. Thanks for watching and go have fun.